being someone who's going to be making product decisions or influencing them, hearing it from the horse's mouth, and then kind of always like synthesizing product vision with what you're hearing. I think that's great. The challenge I've seen with first-time founders, I experienced myself, is a lot of people coming from the tech background and other backgrounds as well. There's a particular person that enjoys sales. I'm probably not that person, but I learned to enjoy sales once I clarified what it is, what it's not. And it's kind of like going over the stereotype of a stereotypical salesperson and kind of like not seeing yourself as that, but then finding your own style. And I think seeing the results, closing the actual deals, that gave me the proof points that I can do this job and enjoy it. And then that's another thing is like when you have features that you ship on the product side, that's exciting, but then kind of selling the product and then materializing value, that's almost like a second win. And then being able to participate in both, I think is pretty impactful.
Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah. I am your host, Leah Darin, and we are about to spill the tea with the best from tech about product growth and senior leadership topics. Good morning, everyone. Today we are talking to a serial founder turned product leader with a knack for building and scaling SaaS, AI, machine learning, and mobile products. He made his mark with ProdSight, a conversational AI startup he led to a successful exit in 2022. Currently, he heads up as a senior director at Playbox, where he's also established a thriving development center. Whether it's navigating startup challenges or leading major product initiatives across continents, he brings a wealth of experience and a clear visionary approach to everything he does. He also should a little bit write more on his newsletter. Welcome to the Product Tea, Tadas Labudis. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, Leah. Excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
It's very nice to have you here, and I already called you out on the newsletter. I'm really sorry. I just kind of had to. Can you introduce yourself in case someone does not know you?
Sure. Well, my name's Tadas. I've been working in startups for probably about 12 years now, mostly early stage, but also the scale up. And what I really like is SaaS. That's kind of where I specialized over the last 8 years. And the topic in particular of kind of going over the field of selling, like doing founder-led sales and kind of scaling from there. So currently, actually, I left Playbox about a year ago. I'm now working as a mentor within a TechScaler accelerator program in Scotland and working a lot of first-time founders that are going through this experience from the very beginning. And, there's certain kind of common mistakes and issues I see across, which is kind of interesting being kind of like going through that and now seeing that these mistakes repeated and also, some of the kind of common ways of going around them and solving them. So yeah, I'm excited to chat about that and take it from there.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that SaaS is your hobby, or like I think you mentioned something like this. I can totally relate. It's not a good hobby to tell other people, like in dating, but I think in B2B, it's good that you mentioned that it is also your hobby. So tell me really quickly, what do people get wrong about you once they get to know you?
Well, I think one of the things is maybe that's more generally about entrepreneurs is a lot of my friends think I'm, this kind of risk taker, taking bold decisions like leaving my job, starting a company. I think in reality, a lot of the risks I take are quite calculated and measured. And I sweat over kind of like the trade-offs and pros and cons of things. And, I'm not immune to anxiety and decision paralysis on these things. I think that's maybe a more general misconception about entrepreneurship being risky. I think, yes, you could lose a lot of money and time and opportunity costs, but, you're not going to die from entrepreneurship. I think that's very rare. So I think some of the risks people take in real life, like extreme sports, they're way, way riskier than running a startup for a couple of years.
Okay, this is the first time we talk about death in founder-led companies. But yeah, I think while it is true, it could definitely lead to depression very quickly. But I think what people are really afraid of is not exactly being solo or whatever, right? Like I think what they're actually afraid of is leaving the security that they have from the other job. And I think, like it's very likely that you lose a lot of money as an entrepreneur. That's just what it is at the moment as well. Like you just need to be ready for that. But the other thing is that I sometimes think that people always want to have both, right? Like they want to have security. Mm-hmm. On one hand, they do not want to pay for their dreams, but also get the success from risky bets like being an entrepreneur. And I think it's quite interesting, right? Like we call this, I don't know how to translate this into English, like the Feuerungswegliche, like this is like you want to have the coin and the thing that you buy with it. I think it's called in English, it's like having the cake and eat it too, or something like this.
For sure.
But I think, look, If you have a dream and you just really want to do it, then it's going to cost you money. Yeah. Like, why do people not invest their money if they have it into themselves? Because that's what usually entrepreneurship is, at least in the beginning.
For sure. And I think another aspect is, don't quote me, I don't remember the actual stat, but I think someone did a study and they found that the embarrassment, being embarrassed in general, that's for most people more scary than dying or getting injured. It's this kind of psychological things like, if this thing fails, then everyone's going to look at me and think I'm a failure, and that's going to reflect on you. And in reality, that's over exaggerating in your head, but that's how people operate, right?
I cannot stress how true this is, specifically when we talk about user research and the validation on, like, like when we're creating something as well, like for people.
Mm-hmm.
The number one thing that you cannot do with a product is embarrass your customer. So I'll give you a very specific example. Like, if you have presentation software, you better make sure that it doesn't fail while someone has a meeting, because it's going to, like, people will always take it on their own kind of reflection. Or if you have a recommendation program in PLG or whatever, like for your customers to kind of recommend it to others.
Mm-hmm.
And your product is about, I don't know, I don't have a good example right now, but let's say the recommendation would say something about you that falls back on you negatively. So for instance, like, I have this amazing therapist for depressed people. By me recommending it to someone, I'm kind of, I'm kind of admitting that I have a weakness and so forth. And this is a huge, huge, huge blocker for a lot of companies and people in general. As soon as you do not look professional anymore, as soon as you do not look good anymore in the eyes of yourself, at least, this is going to cut everything completely around. And I think this is very interesting because exactly what you said, people are just very, very afraid of, looking negative. Like, LinkedIn is a platform that has just been built on the perfect image.
Yeah.
In business. And it's not that different as it is from Instagram. It's just Instagram is just like the part of the personal side, right? Like on B2B, it's exactly the same. We always condense the most beautiful stuff about us, put it out there, and then hope that this is how people are forming their opinions.
I think so much about entrepreneurship and product building and UX is about psychology and kind of social science. And I think the more you kind of look at that theory, the more things kind of fall into place, like why people act a certain way in your product, or why you act a certain way as a founder. Why are you having all these emotions as you're going through the journey? So, yeah.
We had a lot of people in relatively senior titles where we started to evaluate them as well, like at Godphoto, for instance, like for the CPO role and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the candidates I simply rejected also on the notion of they tried to look too perfect. Right. So, like, at some point, if you're starting to apply to jobs, or you try to get a new position, or whatever it is, or like you start to work with your own employees,
Mm-hmm.
if you hide your inconsistencies in the areas that you are not good with
Mm-hmm.
too much, you're starting to actually negatively impact what you're trying to achieve. There's no doubt in my mind about this. We can talk about how you should look towards marketing towards on the outside, right? Like how I want to present myself to the market. Okay, all fine. But when you are building a product, you need to be okay with being fallible, with having weaknesses. That's a big mistake that I did. I did not admit to my own weaknesses and did not get a founder and a co-founder that would kind of, balance this out and so forth. That's a big one. But maybe we can talk about this right now a little bit in a different context. And one of the reasons why I was really excited also to talk to you about is that we're all talking about product-led growth, like, and how the product should sell itself. You're also someone that has been in the AI and the machine learning space, and you know how easy it is to like create some products, well, maybe even good products, if you know what you have to build. And that's usually always like kind of like the crux. And whether you're now a new company founder or you're trying to expand your existing product market fit, I've written down a sentence and I find it quite funny because one of the best ways to start with a PLG company is with a salesperson. And you're talking about this quite a lot as well, right? Like founder-led sales. Can you give us a little bit of flavor on this, what you think about that, and why would we say something like this? I'm just assuming now that you also subscribe to that statement.
Yeah, well, I have a personal experience, kind of balancing product-led approaches and sales-led and making my own mistakes in that area, but also I think what's interesting from the founders I work with through TechScaler is how, those two approaches kind of counteract and how they influence the early days and kind of the bootstrapping path or like self-funding path. So my own experience is with ProdSite, when I started ProdSite, I came from almost like a B2C to B company where we were building mobile apps for deskless workers and hospitality workers. So it was like an alternative to Slack for people who don't have a desk. So we were, replicating this WhatsApp-like experience because that's where we're trying to acquire users from, have them switch from WhatsApp to our app and then conduct their work communications there. So the bar for the kind of UX polish in that product was really high. So we would obsess about many aspects that make the product click as fast as possible. So, can we hook someone in like the first minute of using the product? And, that I didn't think of that as product-led growth, but that's essentially what we were doing, acquiring users through this bottom-up motion. So when I started Prodside, and that was a B2B SaaS company in the customer insight space, we kind of like to use the tools that we know. So that's immediately what I applied. I thought I'm going to build the product-led infused version of this customer insights product, which was typically sold as an enterprise product. Book a demo, let's set you up in an annual plan, and then maybe you'll get access to the product at that point. And that was kind of a mistake because the types of people that would sign up for a product, I think, ended up being the wrong customers. They were extremely price conscious. They sometimes would not have the best experience because of the setup required, and kind of get lost in that PLG funnel. And then the customers that ended up being the right customers, the way they shop for that software was through booking demos, and then kind of familiarizing. Usually was the first time they bought that kind of software in the first place. So kind of seeing demos across a few products, comparing, then maybe doing a little pilot. That was the way they would buy the software and then get approval for budget. So it took me way too long, embarrassingly too long, to realize that once we made the shift to sales-led, and then I went over my own fear of selling as a founder, we started becoming more successful closing deals. But also, I thought about this topic from the perspective of, let's say there's a B2B SaaS startup that has a choice of building something product-led, much like Miro or Asana started, or they could have maybe like a mid-market or enterprise type sales motion. And let's introduce another aspect that perhaps they don't have rich friends or family that will fund them in the first days, and they're not quite ready for that kind of VC check. So for self-funding, like which approach is more doable? And I think there's almost no question it's the sales-led approach, because that's the quickest path to revenue. Instead of building an elaborate funnel, all these kinds of features that will usher the users and then waiting until they're ready to convert. You could email someone on LinkedIn, cold, get a meeting, and then get that first check, if you're lucky, within a couple of months. And I kind of sometimes wonder what that does to the product, what that does to the level of ambition or the size of the idea. But there's also positives like, being so close to the customer, literally, talking to them as you're closing them, that could be a great source of insight. So I'm kind of conflicted on that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
So first of all, I agree with you 100%. The way that I'm thinking about this nowadays is that, so let's say your final kind of vision where you want to go is an easy to use product that can be self-served to some degree, but it also has applications in the upmarket, right? So like Slack is definitely used by bigger companies as well. Like this is not a product that is mainly sold to people who have companies like 3 to 4 people, right? Like that's not their target market and so forth. Now, I do think it makes a lot of sense, also what you said, to prove that you can have some upmarket demand. So companies who do pay enough money per individual account just to prove that they exist, build out the first version of the product to serve them well enough without going completely overboard, while still retaining some of the product-led growth aspects. So what I mean with that is that we can still build an enterprise solution that is extremely easy to onboard with if we have first a demo given by a salesperson. Let me elaborate on this. So really quickly, what that means is people always talk about, product-led growth is like when you completely can serve yourself, like you can pay and you do not talk to a salesperson. I actually think there's a very specific segment in the market where you do have a salesperson first for whatever reason, like whether it's for compliance or like I need to explain something very quickly first before whatever it is, right? That you cannot serve through the product, and that's okay. But then what is the most common thing that happens with bigger clients and bigger, let's say like 30,000 upwards per year? Mm-hmm. They want to have a proof of concept. And this proof of concept would be normally at least from the 50,000 to 100,000 per year that they pay, something that takes 1 to 3 months. Can we test this now with the users, right? So like we generated not demand with salespeople, but we generated buy-in. Yes, let us test this now, right? So like in a way, we're putting the salesperson first before we show them the freemium or whatever you want to call it, like the free trial, whatever it is, right? And this POC should be more built like a PLG function rather than just like helping the salesperson. And that's a big difference. So for instance, let's say we know that our buyer is always someone in a 500 people company and so forth, and they typically onboard 10 to 20 users onto the product that are using it, but it's not the buyer themselves. Then the product that we are shipping should already have product usage analytics, right? Like we're using this now to gather feedback to inform like how the product should look like afterwards. Is this not product-led growth anymore? Just because we had a salesperson first, like because you're an early stage founder that just wanted to have the conversation first? In my opinion, it is, right? Because this kind of need of like having a good interactive demo or like an easy to onboard product and so forth. It's in every sales process that I know, but most sales-led companies have shitty onboarding flows because they never give themselves the time and because they treat the product as, oh, give me new arguments to sell rather than how can we, what we have, make easy to sell. And if you're a founder that is selling, you are the sales department. So if you can kind of manage this, then you really have the best of both worlds. Because I still think while you do not have that much revenue, it's really easy to also simplify the product compared to if you had like 10 million in revenue, like with all your sales-led contacts, and then you start to kind of simplify the interface. That does not work anymore because now you have a lot of people who already built integrations, like on top of all of your crap and so forth. This is why I'm looking into this kind of mixed approach.
Yeah, I think what you said made me think of is, and I made this mistake as well, is kind of thinking of product-led growth as the initial stages of the funnel, right? It's kind of like, how do we get users into the product in the first place? But I think reading Alanis Verna's post, I think she recommends people starting with the retention, which is, very far down the funnel, and then looking at other aspects of the funnel that could be optimized for product-led growth. And even thinking back of the experience, I think for Prod side, it didn't make sense to have a product-led growth optimized onboarding flow because there was complexity, there was education, there was, compared to other sales processes, and we wanted to kind of fit in with what these products look like and how they're bought. But when building our product, for example, one of the key distinctions between Prod side and our competitors, so we were doing text analytics, and there's different methods you can use to classify text, but many of our competitors chosen this kind of black box approach, which was we're going to give you 50 or even 100 different classes. We're going to optimize this model for your data, and then it's going to classify and sort this customer feedback or support tickets or whatever in these classes in perpetuity. And if you want another topic, just come to us and we're going to train it, add it into your mix. And that's already, once you close the sale, that becomes kind of a burden in your process. You have to do this manual step. The way we built Prod site was completely self-service. You could build your own topics. You could train your own models. We invested a lot of money and time into building the self-service functionality, which was nothing to do with onboarding. It was all about maintaining the product and its usage. So that kind of made me wonder, like, is that part of PLG motion, or is that kind of beyond that question?
Yeah, I don't know the answer anymore. As someone that is also defining what the term means, it's a bit weird. So I honestly don't think that product-led growth is as clear-cut as it used to be. And maybe if it even was at some point, I still think that all companies with time will do something product-led growth in some ways. It's probably called product-led sales for most companies. I also do think that the classical sales-led organizations are going to go away simply for the fact that even in higher upmarket businesses, even if you do sell to really, really high upmarket companies, it's still better to have a product-led organization. That doesn't mean product-led growth, right? But like a product-led organization where the product teams are having revenue responsibility in some kind of way, right? Like how does what we do connect also to the revenue? But without going too much into this kind of topic, I think what you just described is a very interesting thing because yes, we should always start with retention, right? Like if you cannot prove that you cannot retain people for free your ICPs, then you should not even think about monetization. Now, does that mean that you need to have a freemium? Not necessarily. So I'll give you a very good example. Let's say your product is built for 50 people teams in B2B in a very specific vertical, like let's say healthcare. I don't know. I cannot think of an example product right now, but let's say this is your target group. You do not need to work on a freemium for I don't know how many months just so they could test this kind of stuff. But what you can do is you can go out with your founder-led sales motion and you can try to onboard a team of 20 people, something that is kind of similar size where we handle the entire integration effort, right? Like, so we assume that you're already kind of onboarded. And then we try to prove that once this is done, that the people still use your product for free because it derives so much value for them. If you cannot prove that, and because we kind of took away the entire integration that we did, it is the product that is wrong. If you don't do that, then you think it's either your onboarding or it's the product. And this is why isolating this is super, super important, that you really only test your product first. And this is what we call product market fit, right? You can only know whether you have product market fit if you really prove that you have retention on the free side. Don't think about monetization and your entire payment gateway and so forth if you cannot talk, as some companies, into using this for free, even if it's just friends, which is not a good idea, but like at least you have something to start with.
I guess this comes back to the first-time founder dilemma. If you have a limited personal runway to set up this business, I guess it might make sense for a certain product, if you cannot charge anything at all, to give it for free, maybe bypassing procurement or whatever. That's still not money coming in, right? So how do you fund yourself? Yes. And increasingly what we've seen with the kind of recession, there's been obviously less risk taking by investors, which means they like to see that path to revenue as fast as possible, just as a proof point that people will pay. And the payment kind of becomes part of the validation. That means there's a budget there that you can tap into. And, with the assumption that the more you can capture, the higher the value of the problem. So now if you're a founder and you have, let's say, this insight that, if you came back to an investor with 5 paying customers, even if they didn't really get a lot of value, that almost feels like better than having 10 customers that are free, that are really enjoying the product, but there's no money to show for. I could see how these conflicting incentives could take a founder down the kind of the path of least resistance and potentially hurt the long-term future of this business.
So let's talk about this in a second. So what I'm thinking about here is also when I see younger founders, and the young, I don't mean like young in terms of age, but like young, like, young as a founder themselves, because they think they can do this, is 2 mistakes that they always do. The first one is they overestimate their pipeline that they have when they do founder-led sales. Mm-hmm. So very, very typical, right? Like when I see pitch decks and we're sitting together and we're trying to look into good investments, then red flags usually start with, we have 5 customers that said that they're going to buy our products. Because the first question I always ask, like, so how advanced are they in the pipeline? Well, they sent us a letter of intent. We're very, very close in closing them. Mm. Stuff that is not signed is not in your books. And I do not consider it to be there at all. It's just what it is, right? Sales in enterprise is not done until the ink is dry. That's the first thing. The second thing is you cannot hurry your clients in any way, shape, or form. If you're trying to sell, and this is also why I said that, try to sell to teams of 20 first, instead of like your ICP that might be 50 or 100. If you do sell to business clients, consider that they will not, even if they will buy you at some point, they will not generate any revenue in the first 3 to 6 months. That's just what it is, right? So like what I'm thinking about is, yes, you can make a commercial contract. But what you can say is you can give them an extended POC time where you say like, hey, we're going to give you the product for free for the next 3 to 6 months, just so we can prove that we can retain, right? It's an alignment of incentives from us to you. And then after 6 months, if you like it, then these are the commercial terms that we can talk about. We still need to kind of clarify what could this cost for you like down the line, but in this time, you're completely free to use it. If you feel like this is worth it until then we can talk about it, and that's a good thing. So that gives you also some kind of predictability in terms of like what money could come in. We also have some kind of check in that a company says like, like we cannot afford this whatsoever. But I think the ultimate truth is like, if you really deliver value, monetization on their side, they will pay for it, right? It's unfortunately that simple, but also extremely hard to kind of demonstrate that.
I like this model a lot. And actually, this is something I randomly stumbled into in the last year, a process before we sold, which is basically we called it a paid pilot program. And I think what you're talking about is, the first aha moment might be you do a great demo and they kind of see a theoretical example of how this product could solve, but that's not practical. I think, well, for us was their data being analyzed in the topics that they've seen or they have hunches around and kind of seeing the actual numbers attached. And even if it's like just the last couple of months worth of data, that was the aha moment we needed to get the sale. But we wanted to charge for that. And that was kind of the first hurdle. Once we got over getting payment for the first pilot, we almost had a trial run with their procurement, with the approval process. All the same people that would approve the bigger sale were also involved in a smaller way, in a less risky way for the pilot. And not every pilot would translate into an annual account, but that was a critical step in the buying journey where potentially if we didn't do the pilots and there was this huge jump from I've seen a demo, let's now buy this, 5 or 6 figure product, having the pilot was instrumental in proving the value.
Yeah. And I think your goal should never be to sell to the client in the end. Your goal should always be to leave a good impression. Because in these times, there's also something that can actually happen, right? So, like, I don't know, the person that is responsible is just leaving out of nowhere. That happens quite a lot, by the way, right? Like in sales processes, like if you have a lead time of like 8 months, people just change it inside of the product. And why should you leave a good impression? Because these things tend to come around again, right? So, like, if your product is really good, you're going to come and have a conversation the year afterwards, or they start to recommend you. Someone that leaves is now suddenly in a new company. Now they can use you as leverage to kind of do something else and so forth. And to the thing that you said, like in terms of like, hey, what can we deliver as a recurring service? Because this is quite important. Like if you do just one analysis and then that's the entire value that you guys have as a product, then a subscription SaaS business might not be the correct solution for you, right? Like then you're probably more like a list seller and so forth. But if you sell something like, I don't know, we're enriching your data on a continuous basis, I can demonstrate that on a very specific set of your customers on a continuous basis so you can see what this actually does and how it is to work with before we roll it out to your entire kind of database. And these are quite interesting insights in a sense. The other thing is why I think personally that founder-led sales is so strong is usually because the incentives make a lot of sense. So usually there's no commission inside of founder-led sales, right? So like if I as a founder sell to someone else, I'm not trying to oversubscribe them. You will still have like these anxiety moments where you're like, oh, like we need this particular contract, this needs to come in, this needs to happen and so forth. But there is a difference between being the founder and being a salesperson that will leave in a year again, right? You're going to be much more conscious about like, hey, I cannot destroy my business over this. Right. So you're also starting to be a little bit more careful that you're not being turned into an agency because what they want from us to kind of close the deal would deviate me so far from the vision.
Right.
And this is why I'm thinking like founder-led sales is actually a very powerful thing before you reach, I don't know, let's say 5 million in revenue or whatever, because you can stumble into this relatively fast.
And yeah, absolutely. I think being someone who is going to be making product decisions or influencing them, hearing it from the horse's mouth, and then kind of always like synthesizing product vision with what you're hearing, I think that's great. The challenge I've seen with first-time founders, I experienced myself, is a lot of people coming from the tech background and other backgrounds as well. There's a particular person that enjoys sales. I'm probably not that person, but I learned to enjoy sales once I clarified what it is, what it's not. And it's kind of like going over the stereotype of a stereotypical salesperson and kind of like not seeing yourself as that, but then finding your own style. And I think seeing the results, closing the actual deals, that gives, at least that gave me the proof points that I can do this job and enjoy it. And then that's another thing is like when you have features that you ship on the product side, that's exciting. But then kind of selling the product and then materializing value, that's almost like a second win. And then being able to participate in both, I think is pretty impactful. The downside of being crippled by this fear, and I see many founders fall into this trap. They build something, and they will do anything else, procrastinating on any, possible activity except from either generate pipeline or close pipeline. And that's what ultimately will kill you. If that's what you need to do to get this product out in the market, you can't just hire a salesperson without building that playbook yourself and being that leader that says, look, I have closed sales on this product. You can do too with this training and experience. But if you can't prove that as a founder, you have nothing to stand on, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you said something really funny already, because I was about to ask you a question on like what are the common misconceptions that you feel like new founders have when we talk about founder-led selling. So like what is it, right? So like what it definitely isn't is you hiring as a founder someone else to do it for you, at least not in the earlier stages, for sure not. What other misconceptions do you feel are present when we talk about founder-led sales versus what it actually is?
Well, I think a lot of people have this image of a salesperson that's kind of slick looking, extroverted, fast talking person. And, if that's an image you have, that's a stereotype. It's not every salesperson. But if that's the image you have and you don't feel like you live up to that image, I think you could fall into two categories. Either want to be paralyzed by kind of like the structural obstacle of you not being this person and not doing any sales at all, or trying really hard to match that persona when that's not natural and then fail that way. In reality, a great salesperson listens a lot and does a lot of discovery instead of talking. I think if you're talking too much, you're probably a bad salesperson. So the stereotype itself is bad. Is of a bad salesperson. So I think that was at least the case for me. And I've seen other people, even like on the lead generation side, I've heard some people say that I was like, what's stopping you from emailing 20 prospects today? And what he says, like, I hate receiving these kinds of messages myself. Therefore, I don't want to do it to others. And then that's, I guess, another stereotype. They probably are thinking of the worst possible outreach messages they've received, as opposed to the great ones, which probably came across as warm and welcome. So I was like, don't send messages like that. Send the messages you would like to receive. But the activity itself is not hurtful. It's only hurtful if you do it badly, right? So I guess like finding your style, being relevant, and doing to your own quality standard, as opposed to trying to fit into some stereotype it's probably like just bad practice anyway.
I think you made a brilliant point right now as well, like outbound messaging, right? Like cold outreach I think this is what people are uncomfortable with. Because if someone is in your pipeline and then they talk about, oh, like we love your product, we would like to just have a chat with it, that's kind of a different setup. So a lot of it is around cold. I really like this point. And I think I can definitely tell when cold outbound actually worked in my case.
Mm-hmm.
There is an instance where I can actually say that it worked because my assistant I found because she was messaging me on LinkedIn, hey, I would like to work for you. Right? This is outbound. This is like just her putting herself out there and then just like this, right? And she actually found me with this, or I found her. I actually enjoyed that. And yes, I do have 999 other outbound reaches that were negative, of course, but they're not on top of my mind anymore. I don't remember a single one, right? So like this is a little bit of the thing where we have to get out of our heads in this regard. So I really, really like this point that you just made. I think another one is, at least on my side, and I would love to hear also whether you agree with this one, is that maybe you can actually hire someone even quite early to do some selling for you. And maybe it even works a little bit, right? So like, hey, generate my lists, like, the typical SDR, BDR kind of workflow and so forth. Generate the lists, phone them off and so forth. But I think if you've never done the motion yourself, if you really do not know how sales works in the first place, are you willing to risk the future of your company so bad that you will not be able to spot bad sales if it would happen under your nose? Because that's the other thing. Sometimes people sound really competent. You're kind of glad, like you outsourced the part in your company and so forth, but it's just not good. And the only reason why it's not good and it's still in your company is because you cannot spot that it is a bad thing. You don't need to be a better salesperson than people, but if you've never done exactly what you said, like doing the legwork, like calling 20 people on a Monday morning, which is not that hard. It's just difficult to kind of do because you do not want to do it, but it is not hard from a mechanical standpoint, And I think just like one final point, and I think, like if you do outbound and you put your name on it and you are the founder, you have a higher closing chance than someone that is just a simple salesperson in your company. That is the case. And the reason for it is that we know then, the incentives are aligned. It's your company and you're trying to sell me something without being a salesperson.
I agree. So in that case, as a founder, you probably have it easier already because of this forward credit you're getting from prospects. I don't know if all prospects understand what a founder is. I, often been mistaken by, an employee in the company. They wouldn't check my LinkedIn. They wouldn't know I'm a founder. They would assume I'm a salesperson. So I don't know if I always receive the credit, but it can definitely happen. And on this idea of hiring a salesperson to assist you, I kind of still think of that as an expansion of your emotion as a founder selling to kind of do more of it or do it at the next scale. So I think hiring a salesperson before you've closed, personally sourced and closed 10 customers or whatever, like the minimum, proof point that this product sells to this ICP, it's actually a trap for a salesperson because they might accept the job because they're excited by the product. But since there's no playbook, there's no proof point that this product sells, you can't even have things like quotas or a performance bonus because no one has sold this product to this degree. So you're taking a risk on yourself being able to sell this product, but also on the product itself being sellable. So I definitely warn account execs and SDRs, like really watch, like, has the founder or anyone in this company sold this product enough times for this to be a repeatable playbook, even in early days?
Yeah, this is extremely important because the only way that you convince otherwise a salesperson is by giving them a very high base salary because they will not risk their neck otherwise. Because, if they don't trust your product to just sell itself and that the compensation plan is solid, then you need to do it over salary. And well, you can probably not afford that, right? Like, this is why sales is extremely expensive if you just outsource it a little bit in the start. So let's say we're doing it, right? So like we're founder-led sales, we're talking to the customers, maybe we're also selling to 5 to 10 customers already successfully,
Okay.
which is already quite a lift, of course. But what do we do with these insights? So you gather a couple of insights as well in these calls, not just like the successful ones, but also like the unsuccessful ones or the unsuccessful ones
Mm-hmm.
in like, why does it not work out and so forth. And I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential when we talk about what's happening in these calls and what the product development should look like afterwards. So like, how does it influence our vision and what we go forward? How do you advise people on moving forward with that specifically? Like maybe also like with which artifacts or like what is the exact process of like what's happening in these calls that it doesn't stay in these calls?
I think sales calls are, for a B2B company, are a gold mine. Support tickets are, that's something we spend a lot of time, but it comes from a different point of view. That's more about retention and keeping your customers happy because they're existing customers. Whilst sales is basically how well the people we think should be using this product are reacting to what we're saying in sales calls and our demos. And then also people that we were not great at selling to yet or didn't know they had a problem. This is about potential markets you could be addressing that maybe you're not capitalizing on yet. So I think in terms of distilling this information, as a founder, you should be thinking about, like, let's say you have a great prospect, it could be, sizable deal. Why are they having a good time in their sales process or why not? What kind of objections are coming up? I think you should be thinking about those things. Now, the trap comes in the form of there's a big potential client. It would be great to have the logo or the revenue, but your product, there's a gap in your product. You don't have certain features or you have to kind of contort this product into something else. And the immediate solution many founders go to is let's do that to get the sale. And I think that's how you build a Frankenstein product. This is kind of bad product management, but
Yep.
Many founders are not product managers by trade. This is something they're kind of stumbling into and then learning about later. So I would kind of, in that situation, if you have a great client and that's not your ICP and you have a product gap, I would think in a way, is this a big market? So are there like 100 more of these if we were to do these features, right? So again, thinking about scalability of the product, or if not, could this revenue in some way prove as an experiment? Maybe that could be a great learning experience if you build this feature. And in some other cases, it just doesn't make sense. It puts you like, you're going here and you've done all your research, you have validated your strategy. And then there's like the side quest that's a complete dead end. And I think because of the conflicting incentives, it can be hard for founders to avoid this trap, but do it too many times and you end up with a basic like productized consultancy or at worst, like tons and tons of technical debt that slows you down the line. So this is about reconciling short-term and long-term incentives. What else? In terms of socializing the insights, what I used to love to do is invite even my engineers to sales calls to just listen in. Again, being respectful of what they have on their plate. Like they're not going to listen to 5 calls a day, but like having 2 or 3 per month is a great way. Again, not being this kind of broken telephone where obviously if you are retelling the story or summarizing insights from 5 clients, that's some detail going to get lost. It's not going to be as real. Whilst if someone hears a customer say it from their own lips, that story kind of embeds in a different way. And that can take 2 forms. Like one is joining a call from time to time. Another one's having something like Gong and just sharing recordings widely. And the third way is you used to have this kind of roadmap review meeting. And as part of that, I would discuss sales insights as one of the sections. And that kind of puts the strategic decisions we were making and the product roadmap, connecting them back to the sales insights.
Yeah, I really like this. And also, I think these insight meetings are also great, but I also think that don't be afraid of sharing edited insights, like snippets. I think it's worth it, really. Like, specifically if you're starting to get a little bit bigger, like 20 people, 25 and so forth, and you have an all hands meeting, you're not going to listen to an entire call, of course, right? But like if you have a good cutout of like 3 to 5 minutes of a relevant conversation, that's really, really powerful. So rather than just saying like, oh, our customer is struggling with this and this, show them how they struggle and what emotions they have in these particular moments. I think it's a very good tip as well. And I think just going really quickly back to these insights, I really like it when we think about what is the difference, or like in these calls, as you said, we should be listening for maybe the majority of the time. But what is the difference between what the customer or the prospect expected and where do I have to kind of pivot them a little bit into another direction? So for instance, if we do get a call with someone, then usually we had some kind of cold outreach.
Okay.
I write an email or I do write a message on LinkedIn and so forth. And with this, I give already kind of an impression on what it is about, right? Like this is marketing. It is marketing. Then they might, before the call, they might look into our website or whatever. So there's no possible way in the world where someone has no clue and just says like, oh, Tadas, I cannot wait. Just tell me a little bit about what you do. I have no idea what you're doing. Mm-hmm. They always have some kind of idea. Okay. And these misconceptions, so like what they expect and what we kind of deliver are a very important hint to kind of record to figure out, is the problem of this misconception in-house? Is our messaging not clear? Or is it our website and so forth? Or is it a common misconception that the market has about a product like we have it? As we have misconceptions about salespeople, like everybody's just out for your money and so forth.
It's like an industry or category stereotype.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you do know this, then you can start to play into this. So like, let's say we have 5 people who are telling us, oh, I thought that you are ABC, but actually you're not. Then I can start to weave this in, because if it is an important point, then I can start to put it into the messaging that we have. And this is why we have to kind of sort out these misconceptions that customers have and already bring into the call, fix them either on our messaging, or we start to change the product to be communicated better in that sense. And that's super, super important, because it has very little to do on whether you're going to close with this or not. It's just that you probably lost a lot of people already because they had these misconceptions, but did not pick up a call with you because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, in the early days and even later on, I don't think this actually ever goes away. It's just the timeframes might expand. Founder-led sales is not just about closing as many deals or as quickly as possible. That's obviously, important, but I think especially early on, it's more about refining the ICP, refining the messaging, refining the product, catching yourself out. Whereas I said that we should focus on this future, and a lot of founders, they're expected to be visionary and kind of come up with these 5-year, 10-year plans. And then there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you then kind of double check that the reality is actually in sync with that, right? And sometimes you might be, we're going towards this vision. Like I was thinking, I'm going to create, a self-serve customer insights platform. And the more I would speak to these prospects in sales, I would realize that actually the way they want to buy is very different. And then I think is kind of using that, like a second goal of your sales call is validating your vision, validating your strategy, validating your roadmap, and then also then bringing that back. Say, look, I had 10 calls. I think where we said we're going is wrong because of this new information. So for me, sales was just as important as to listen. It's kind of the thing that grounds you to reality, right? And truth seeking, I think, is crucial for founders. And I think that's an often missed point.
I think there's also this really interesting dynamic. If you're getting frustrated as a founder to sell to customers who are completely always blowing you off, just saying like, no, 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 I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen, then there's going to have a material impact into the company because you're also getting frustrated, right? You're like, hey, something is wrong, right? Like it's the messaging or like it's what we're selling and so forth. Whereas if you outsource this, there is a danger that you just say like, oh, my salesperson is not good enough. And this goes a lot again, like to the same thing that we said at the very beginning. Test one thing at a time. Take the variables out so you do know what's wrong with what you are doing, because a lot of the stuff that we do in new companies is wrong. But it only helps us if we can also identify what is actually wrong. It's actually quite rare that you are just shit at selling. If you have a good product, if you really, really have a good product and you get in front of someone that actually has this need, nobody will not buy from you just because they don't like your face. That's just what it is.
That's true.
You might be getting better with time and experience. You might be closing 20, 30% more and so forth, but 20 or 30% more of zero is still zero. And that's the kind of thing where I'm just saying, like, nobody expects you to be the perfect salesperson, but you need to prove that there is some kind of demand in the market where someone says, like, this is so good that we're going to spend eventually money on it. But first, we have to convince people that they want to spend time on this. The phone call, the POC, whatever, like if I'm the buyer, I'm only going to involve my team if you can convince me that this is worth my time. And then we can talk about payment. And if this is not product-led growth, then I don't know what it is. I really don't, right? This is what I'm saying. Like every product-led growth business has a sales motion anyways. So
yeah, it almost feels like so much about product-led growth. It's expanded as a concept, and I don't know the full history, so I might be kind of naive about it, but it's just good product management. There's lots of lessons there. It's good marketing practice. So I wonder if the subject has now grown to the point where it's almost like worth breaking it down again and saying, like, for this, these are the best lessons. For this, these are the tools you could use. But, like anything in the world, we go through marketing hype cycles, and that's what gets people thinking about certain things. And I think in general, like having to think about different ways in which you could optimize your product to better serve customers, that's a good thing. Even if it doesn't work or even not every single aspect applies, just the very kind of question itself is worthwhile.
yeah, I think you're on the money there. And I think my current definition of product-led growth is that if you look at the customer's journey or the prospects, they will have different touch points with you regardless, right? So like there's going to be different stages they go through: informational, marketing, sales, whatever, right? Like, but maybe not even in that order. Maybe sometimes marketing first and product a little bit, then marketing again and so forth, whatever it is. To me, you still need to understand product-led growth, when to use it and when not to use it, because in the end, if a product can deliver specific parts of that journey more cost efficient than sales, then you have an advantage towards the rest of the industry. And it is the truth that sales-led companies or like a salesperson costs more money. Does not mean that PLG is always better, but if you have the choice and there could be something done on a very specific part of the journey that is self-served, then you should do it. Because this cost efficiency matters quite a lot. It also gives you more data. Like free parts of the product have just simply more users than those that where you have salespeople on it. That's also another thing, right? So like we can test much more. And I think in the end, all of this it is an exercise on receiving the most cost efficient motion for your business. And, after like doing this already a couple of years right now, I always find the solutions inside of the product organizations, how they're structured, how they're building products, whether they're just like being the slaves of the salespeople. I think you called it agencyfication or whatever. It's like, that's definitely the first part. And then the second thing is like, okay, so how do we align all the silos? Because this is not a product initiative. It really is a cross-functional thing that needs to go from sales to product to marketing, and then also kind of shake this up a little bit. But I also think that current organization structures are not really built for a customer journey that is just not linear anymore. It's just not built for that.
Well, one of the things that, again, don't quote me on the stat, but I've read that about 70 or 80% of revenue in mature SaaS companies inevitably comes from enterprise. So whether you start product-led, self-service, freemium, free trial, whatever, ultimately you will have some enterprise motion if there's an application for it. So many companies have gone that way. Sana, Miro, many kind of PLG poster children. But I think like what you kind of just said about PLG being about efficiency or kind of cost efficiency for sales. Yes, salespeople are humans. Great ones cost a lot of money. So it is more expensive to do demos, to do calls, to go through the process than having the product, serve the customer through software. But I think for the early stage, especially of the company, it's a bigger investment in product and experimentation. So it's almost like you will pay more to get it right, so it then reaps the reward of cost efficiency. It's like buying like expensive machinery for your factory and then tuning it over months and years. Whilst the sales that approach, I think there's a lot of crappy product experience could be covered up by a decent sales process. But then at what point do you start, I guess, either regretting or starting to feel the cost of running a sales process ramp up? And where's that trade-off point where it's like, if we invest in product-led growth, this is when we're going to start the efficiency, versus if you go sales-led, you're going to pay more initially per unit, but then, just going to linearly extrapolate from there.
I think the ultimate truth in the end is anyways, if you want to build a company that lives from enterprise value, and I think for all bigger companies that is actually true, exactly in the way that you said, then you have to go over the mid-market. If you want to go and get something of the mid-market, then you also need to go over SMBs. And what I mean with that is that, yes, you should anyways prove early stage that you can sell to enterprises. But you also want to grab enterprises while they're still mid-market companies, and you still want to grab mid-market companies while they're SMBs. The entire HubSpot model is built on the hypothesis that some of your clients are going to expand as they are inside of the product and then scale with the product as they become bigger. And if you serve them well enough, they will never look for a different solution. This is why Salesforce is not getting a chance on acquiring these customers, because they're already with HubSpot and they're happy enough. So this is why I'm saying like PLG is often about expansion, right? Like on the long, this is like why this is such a long-term kind of play. And also conversely, a reason why you should first prove that you can get to the end state first. Can I see some kind of demand on enterprise or mid-market if you see your long-term company vision also to go there? And then you can still talk about, hey, how does PLG actually help us to get there in the end? And I think that's a good summary of, in general, how businesses are. There's no company that wants to go down market. Nobody does. Like as a goal of making more money. It's always about like, how does the down market enable us to make more money up market? That's a correct always question. But nobody wants to go down market. Everybody wants to go up market, of course.
You said it.
There you go. Boom. Done it. Tadas, we've been going for an hour. Should people contact you in any way? Do you want them to reach out to you? And if so, who should do that?
Increasingly, despite the memes and self-promotion posts on LinkedIn, I do spend a lot of time there. I really like the messaging side of it. So I think that's the best way to reach out to me. If you type in my name in the search, Tadas Labudis, you will find me, and I'm happy to connect with people, even if we haven't met before. And we can talk about startup topics, product management, whatever.
That sounds great. So thank you very much for joining this hour with me. I think it was a great conversation. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Lee. We enjoyed it as well.
Cool. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to The Product Tea with Lea. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leatarin.com, which is lehatharin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.